in a certain context of Buddhist philosophy and teachings, the path, the mind is classified in two types. We have what's called Gundak in Tibetan, and then we have Lyenkye, Kundak. We could translate that as something, we could translate it as the mind that is constructed, projected. Kun means all, and Dak means projected, the constructed mind. And Lenkye, we can translate it as spontaneous. So we would have, let's say we can classify our thoughts, our mind in these two parts, the constructed parts and the spontaneous part. Constructed means everything that depends on a cultural context, a social context, where one lives or has been raised. Everything that comes from what we see, what we hear, etc. It's the part, let's call it also more mental, more conceptual, influenced, strongly influenced by what we come into contact with the context in which we live, what we hear, what we see. The spontaneous aspects are those that go beyond the cultural aspects. I mean, we have certain characteristics that independently of where one was born and raised, those characteristics are still there. Let's take an example. Generosity or anger or love. These are they constructed or spontaneous aspects? Is there a culture where anger doesn't exist? I've never seen that. Once I remember one friend who lived for many, many years in among an Amazonian tribe doing work, and there was one tribe that had never had contact with the outside world, and they were doing the work. They were making the first contacts in a positive way, because at some point that contact with the outside world was inevitable. So instead of letting that contact be completely destructive, they were starting with that first approach, wanting it to be healthy. And just one day, he asked, "Does anyone get angry here? I never see anyone angry." And they said, "Oh, there was one who every once in a while would get angry." What do you do? No, when he gets angry, we jump on top of him and we tickle him. So every time this person got angry, everyone around, they would just jump on him, jumping to the ground and tickling him until he just would burst out laughing. I mean, if we did something like this, we'd all end up in court. Anyway, these are spontaneous characteristics. These are aspects that don't depend necessarily on our cultural context, and then how one lives it all. Of course, those are many constructed aspects. But the fundamental point is that spontaneous aspects, they manifest with they they manifest clearly what exists on a subtle and very subtle level. And let's say there's a connection with the so-called subconscious. I don't like using the word subconscious because they have different connotations. They come from different systems. But let's say in connection with a deeper aspect of our mind that reflects then our very subtle mind, these predispositions that we bring from life to life. We live today in a context where an enormous importance is given to our more constructed mind, acquiring information, elaborating data, knowing how to understand, knowing how to see, interpret, do, act. We we give a tremendous amount of importance to what has to do with this direct contact with the external world, with the doing, with producing, realizing, understanding, etc., etc. Just look just look at the curriculums that we have. Um, are they designed to develop um, our spontaneous aspects within, or constructed views? Mostly constructive views. Just look at the direction that the direction we're moving towards with technology in general, research, trying to find the means to better those characteristics. And we've gotten to a point where we, we've gotten to the point where someone can artificially do for us, access information, process information, reach the answer. It's purely the more conceptual aspect. But even when we get close to Buddhism, for example, we have this tendency to get close to Buddhism with this same approach. So we want to learn and understand. We want to keep the so-called control over what happens because we want to understand. We have this idea that if we understand things, then we have the reins in our own hands and we have control. When in the process of the learning process that should be followed, it's a process that includes 3 steps. The first one is listening, it's there where we acquire information. So it's right to listen, read, understand. And then that information, that's just a first step. Then it should be gradually taken to a deeper level. One needs to understand it. To understand means also still on an intellectual level, but it's when that information, that content is no longer something that someone said, but becomes mine. And that, I mean, the dynamics of that change tremendously. I mean, one thing is saying this is like this, that is like that, because this person said so. So we're taking for granted that things are as we're told. Just look at, for example, where is a very common way of saying, if someone says, this is like this, and someone asks, well, who said so? Who said so? But the real process of understanding needs to come from logic, from use of our own experience, putting together these elements to reach our own understanding of things and not rely exclusively on what someone said. And then that third step, the most important, is understanding, first of all, that knowledge exists at the service of something else. The main objective is not to just gain information or knowledge, but to develop our characteristics that transcend this life, our spontaneous aspects. When we talk about the qualities of Buddha, I've never seen it written where it says the Buddha knows many languages, knows how to process information quickly. And we don't talk about these things on this level. What are the characteristics of a Buddha? Courage, stability, joy, patience, love, generosity, humbleness, and um, this lack of need to compare ourselves to others, to see ourselves, concentration, satisfaction, harmony, a view of reality that matches what is. these are all characteristics that are not constructed characteristics. And that is our reality. Our reality is based on, our experience of reality is based on this. What is one of the main filters that we use to experience everything? Are they conceptual ones or are they the spontaneous ones? I mean, they're all conceptual ones and they are important, but there are various filters that we can call emotional filters, various filters that have to do with our past traumas, our emotions, our qualities. And what are the strongest filters? What determine more and more the quality of our experience or the type of experience that we're going to live? They are the emotional filters. And it's here where we should put our energy. Here where we should set our objective. Because understanding is fine, but sooner, more sooner than later, we're going to die and we're going to be reborn with these spontaneous qualities. And, you don't need to die to forget. I mean, just let a few years go by, right? For example, just a side note, very quickly. Our brain has characteristics. I'm talking about the gross mind, the coarse mind has a physical characteristic, which is the more we use a certain aspect of the brain, that part of the brain, it doesn't get used up. It develops. It's imagine the water, in the glass. The more water I drink, less water I have. So if I want to keep a lot of water, I need to drink very little. And the brain is not like this. If I don't use it little by little, it atrophies. Little by little, we lose those abilities, those capacities. The more I use it, the more those qualities, those capacities develop. And so what happens is using the mind. I mean, it takes up energy, even on a physical level. The use of the brain, it uses up energy. It's actually of the internal organs. It's the one that uses up the most energy. So there is a level of fatigue in using the brain, in training parts of the brain that we are not used to training or using. But given that we come from, we have this idea that the less I work hard, the happier I'll be. We're becoming more and more silly. We're atrophying our brain. We're more and more we're not developing aspects of our brain. So we're increasing this dependency on external things, and we're becoming more and more easily manipulated. So generally, it's like, I remember once a friend, I can't remember, it's hard for me to remember his name. It's hard for me to remember his name. Maybe somebody will remember. Once we went to Tibet together with, and then another name. How can I not remember his name? It's a Lama friend of Rinpoche, with Kecho Rinpoche, and among his friends, there was an Australian priest. Anyway, we were quite friendly. We had been to Nepal together, and he was a teacher of phenomenologia at the university. And something he explained to me at the time, he said, what is the point of studying at school? One function, main function, um, is to learn how to learn. Not necessarily to learn, not to acquire that information, but then afterwards in life, one has the ability to to learn what one really wants. If you don't learn how to learn, if you don't if you don't develop that critical analytical part of the mind and ability to memorize, etc., gradually that part it, and that part never gets developed or it gets lost. So what happens is it's not that that process of training um, happens or learning happens only during childhood. No, it's throughout our entire lives. So the what we were talking about before about memory, etc. It's let's tell the truth. As the years go by, our brain's ability, um, um, you know, are we using our brain more and more, and so it's developing more and more? Or are we using it less and less, and so it's atrophying? It's because when we're children, there's something marvelous about learning something. We see something, we don't know what it is. We try to put together, all the different parts and the synapses that come together, and we learn this is this. And the next time we see that same thing, we don't put in all that effort to learn what it is. We know it. We recognize what it is. And as the years go by, the less we know and the more we know, we recognize. So there's less and less an effort to learn new things, to analyze new things. Um, I remember my grandfather always, now he's 99 and his mind is really clear. And once I was with him in Italy, he was about 85 at the time, and he was there with his cell phone and he was playing a game. I said, Grandpa, what are you doing? I said, you like this game? He said, no. I said, well, why are you playing it? He said, because, you know, as the years go by, the part of the mind that is able to that short-term memory becomes weaker and weaker. So one needs to keep that short-term memory trained by learning new things. Otherwise, it gets lost. So what I'm doing is I'm just learning new things. Otherwise, this ability gets lost. What I mean to say is this part of our mind that we call more conceptual, that is strongly connected to our brain, etc., is important, but its nature over time is to degenerate. Obviously, when one dies and is reborn, those characteristics are not taken together. Um, you can be the reincarnation of the wisest, most learned person, but when you're born, you have to start from the beginning. A, B, C, D. Lama Tsongkhapa actually was giving teachings at 3 years old, but and there also there's stories of prodigy children, at very very young age, who were correcting the accounting of his father's shop. These are mm, these are great predispositions, having trained in the previous life. But generally speaking, we can say as the years go by, these are aspects of our brain that degenerate. So I invite you to keep your mind trained, learning new things, putting effort, and trying not to take shortcuts, trying to keep the mind trained, because having a quick mind, a clear mind, with a critical ability, its ability to understand, to judge, to analyze, etc. A mind that is able to create is very important. it depends what one wants, but I think it's very important. If I want to have a mind with these um, um, abilities, I need to use these characteristics constantly. Otherwise, I'll lose them. So it's very important when we see also new technology, new means to ask ourselves, okay, the practical aspects aside, what kind of influence will this have on my mental and physical health? Will it will it substitute a process that I do? If if I don't need that process, okay. And I remember here, for example, one problem that I think that we have in this modern world is is what in particular when we're talking about the spiritual practice. I see that we have tremendous amount of ability to learn. We have access, I don't say infinite, but an enormous um, to access to an enormous amount of information. But one of the greatest difficulties we have, for to practice the Dharma in the modern world is our difficulty in our problem in maintaining constancy and getting putting in energy and getting outside our comfort zone. I mean, the we like the the initial rush, but then to do it every day is different. I remember always this story when I asked my teacher, the abbot of the Tashi Lumpa, when I was there in Tibet. I was asking him why they weren't bringing running water up to his room. They were bringing it by hand. And he answered, if the young people today don't learn to have constancy and effort and put effort into the basics of like having water, how are they going to put effort and have constancy um, with other things that are less vital, like meditation? I mean, we've developed technology that lessens our fatigue. Um, we, it's easy to cook, it's easy to wash. I remember once this lady in Ladakh, she said, I don't understand. When I go in and when I go to the city to see my sister here in the village to get water, I need to go to the river. So I need to walk quite a bit to cook. I need to collect wood and make a fire. To talk to someone, I need I need to go down the mountain and then go back up the mountain. A few hours. It takes a few hours. Ev- every time my sister comes here, we have all the time in the world. When I go to the city to see her, just for water, you just need to turn that little faucet and it comes out. And the fire, you just need to turn the knob. To talk to someone, you just pick up something and you turn, you turn that little thing around and there's another person on the other side. But when I go there, it seems like she never has time for me. No one ever has any time. The technology that we take for granted, the running water and the heat in the house and stove, it's wonderful. And many other things that we've added. But we've often added things. We've found solutions to 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 be more comfortable and um, and to be less tired. I think this is quite natural, spontaneous to want to go in this direction. But more and more, our ability to work hard for something is lessened because our natural way of being, we have this process of this mechanism of compensation. If I feel a pleasure, I experience pleasure, I want that experience to be repeated. So I am ready to work hard to get that pleasure again. If I if I see something that I want, I and I'll if I see something I want and I know that it's going to bring me pleasure, I'll put effort into that. But if I can get that same thing without having to work hard for it, or if I have both of them, one I need to work hard for, one I can just get it immediately, of course I'll take the one that I don't have to work for. So what's happening is that we're able to get to receive pleasures and this release of dopamine without having to work for it. And this mechanism of reward, um, compensation, I mean, we're less and less willing to work hard to get things. We say, oh, well, I'm just going to drop that because I can find pleasures elsewhere with less fatigue. And one mechanism that increases this, I mean, running water, okay. We don't have to physically go and fetch water, but we're going to levels that are far beyond in the communication, social media. For example, it said that understood it. I understood this that when a child is young, what what it, what stimulates a child? Things that are still or in movement. Even a newborn, things that are in movement. Is a child more attracted to black and white or colors? Colors. What about silence or sound? Sound. Why? Why is a child attracted to these things? Movement, color, and sound. Because they stimulate dopamine. Because they create an inner process that's connected to times of the far, far past, related to our survival. So that which stimulates these pleasures, from what I've understood, and I'm not the right person to talk about these kinds of things, but from what I've understood, what stimulates most is movement, color, and sound. And what do we have today that has these three components? Videos. But even if we're not children anymore, that mechanism remains. That's why we're attracted not to the content of what is transmitted to us, but by this inner experience of pleasure that is generated and that creates dependency. And when that pleasure so if that pleasure is more immediate and requires less effort, this takes us more and more to have an inner um, an inner being that is weaker, where we don't have to put effort into things. So a part of the problem here is, as my teacher said, there are certain things that don't have shortcuts. That you can't when you can't outsource. So instead of doing the accounting at home, you pay someone else to do it. So you can't outsource certain things. So what happens is we're taking our own inner processes and we're giving them to someone else. And we see this in many. I mean, the last thing is this topic of artificial intelligence. What happens? It happens that in this process of giving the process to someone else, I lose my ability to do that. Not just to do that thing, but my ability to put energy to overcome problems, to grow. But there's certain things. there's so many things that are not possible to give to someone else to do. We can have the most advanced technology. We can we can have the most developed artificial intelligence in the world, but no one can develop love on our behalf. No one could generate patience for us. No one could cultivate stability and joy, satisfaction, enthusiastic effort, generosity, peace, harmony for us. And to generate these things, we need to change our behavior. We need to change our habits, change our mind, which requires dedication, constancy, and effort. And if we're not used to have this dedication and constancy for the most banal of things, we're not going to be able to have it for ourselves, for our being, and we become weaker and weaker and emotionally more and more fragile. And we it takes very little to lose our balance, we're more and more dependent on external on external things. And I wanted to talk about something today, but I think we'll have to look at it next time we talk. And so it was the characteristics of the Dhyani Buddhas, and I wanted to talk about the stability. Imagine we're making a contract for our own happiness. We're going to establish the happiness. What are the clauses for our own happiness? Think about how we live our own life. What would be the clauses that we would put that would generate our happiness, that we would sign? The more clauses there are, the more difficult it is to actually sign that contract. Someone say, "Oh, okay," but someone might say, "No, if there are more clauses, then the contract is more solid." No, the more clauses there are, the weaker it becomes, the more fragile it becomes. And we have this tendency to put many clauses that are actually even impossible to realize. Once someone said to me, had money in another country, all legal, but this this con- this country didn't allow didn't permit someone to take that money out of the country. So legally you could do it, but the you needed like the permission from 14 different offices. And actually, no one had ever managed. So, yeah, it is possible, but I'm going to make it so complicated so that it's not actually possible. So, yes, I want to be happy, but I'm going to put so many conditions, some of which are not even really feasible. I mean, we put in conditions sometimes that are not feasible. Oh, to be happy, then this person shouldn't act like this, or this person shouldn't be like this. Um, this person should have more patience and love. You should do this, you should do that. I don't know if you've ever put something like this in your contract for happiness, depending on the behavior of someone else. If I put in clauses that are not feasible, not in the sense that someone is not going to change ever, but that this doesn't depend on me. So the fewer clauses that we put in our contract for happiness, the more stable is our inner being. The more stable we become, the more stable is our patience and our love and our peace, sense of peace. But the more dependent we are to external things, even even memories and projections to the future, the more dependent we are on these external aspects, the more fragile we are. So to to have this, to develop this inner stability, we need to diminish these clauses. And I invite you all to take up the reins of your own happiness. Pick up your own contract. Look at your contract. Are there are there clauses that should be eliminated? That's not necessary, not feasible. And little by little, you clean up your contract and understand that actually our inner state of wellness depends mostly not on the conditions around us, but our inner emotional state. And this transforms our being more than anything else. Even from a physical point of view, so theoretical knowledge don't have a great influence over our body, but our emotions do. Knowledge, a theoretical knowledge, conceptual knowledge, etc., doesn't have this ability to change our DNA, but our emotions do. When we talk about epigenetics, for example, it's said that DNA is in constant transformation and it changes depending on the environment in which we interact with. And the environment is of two types. There's an external environment and an internal environment. The external environment are situations, people, that which we perceive through our senses, and the inner environment are our emotions, our emotional inner state of being. And what has greater transformative power, genetically speaking, is our inner environment. For this reason, should be how we shouldn't forget the importance of the direction we're walking, but also remember that it's important to do, but it's more important to be. Come back to this clarity. What do we want to be? And set this as our objective. It's not about knowing and doing, it's about being. And if we see most of our energy as human beings in general is 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 directed towards doing and not to being, to doing and experiencing, having pleasures, using, consuming, instead of just being, when the key, in my opinion, is being. So the question I ask myself, so when we're the question when we consider what we're going to interact with, new creations, old creations, there's many important interactions, but but the interaction with that thing, how is it, we should ask ourselves, how is it going to influence me? How is it going to shape me? Shape what I am, what I will become. Because wherever there's interaction, inevitably there's transformation. And when I interact, I transform. So in what am I transforming myself? And if we see it in other words, the question is, this this interaction, is it positive or negative or harmful to my psychophysical health? Am I developing positive characteristics or am I losing abilities? So, just to conclude, the process of listening, acquiring information, which is absolutely necessary, understanding, making that information your own. It's no longer something that someone that is telling you. It's through analysis, through debate, through actually deepening that information. You read again, you talk about it. It's important to go through this process. And that third step is about putting into practice that knowledge, applying it to our life and familiarizing ourselves with it. I can talk days and weeks about the importance of love, maitri, this desiring the happiness of others and of ourselves. Or we can understand the importance of love, but then we need to actually familiarize ourselves with love. As I familiarize myself with love by inducing a real and sincere, a deep state of love, even if it's artificial in the sense that it doesn't come spontaneously, but I need to induce that state within until it becomes more and more spontaneous. And this is where I think that most of our energy, or a large part of our energy, should be directed in cultivating and developing these qualities that we call innate, spontaneous, those that allow us to live a better life or live life in a better way. But not only this, but also going back to what we talked about at the beginning, the intellectual capacities, our cognitive abilities, we lose those as the years go by. Instead, instead those more spontaneous, innate um, aspects of ourselves, as we get older, do we lose those aspects, or they do they get stronger and stronger as the years go by? Someone who's always been very kind, as he or she gets older, does that person lose that kindness, or does that remain? Normally, that even gets stronger if that person practices kindness his whole life. So, what happens on a deeper, more emotional level shapes also our predispositions, what we will actually take to our next life. So, the conceptual part, um, in spite of how important it can be, it's momentary and at a certain point ends, finishes. Because maybe someone dies, or maybe getting older, one loses those abilities, those cognitive, intellectual abilities. But the deeper aspects of ourselves, what we realize, what we become, those stay with us. Those those imprints continue. We take them with us. A life goes by very quickly, and 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 sooner or later we're going to die. And if we don't die soon, we're going to get older. I mean, it's important to age well, and it's never too late to do it. This depends on our own choices, our own actions, where we put emphasis in our life, and where we put our priorities. Um, where do I put so where I put emphasis is not the intellectual cognitive part of myself, but my more my deeper, more spontaneous, innate um, um, aspects of myself. So here we conclude for today.
Drove Minsela Taktu Negiruchi Kewa Kuntu Yanda Lama Dang Dralme Cheki Pela Longche Chin Sada Lamge Yunte Rabzone Dorje Changi Koba Nyurtobesho Nimo Dele Tsendele Nime Kuyan Delek Shin Ninsen Taktu Delek Pe Kuncho sumke chinge lo, kuncho sumke ngodrubo sol, kuncho sumke trashisho. All'alba,
At dawn or
oltre
at dusk,
monto,
at
di
night or
notte durante il giorno,
midday,
possano i
may
tre
the three
gioielli
jewels grant us
concederci
their
le loro
blessings.
benedizioni,
May
possano
they help
aiutarci
us
ad
to obtain
ottenere
all
tutte le
realizations
realizzazioni
and
e
sprinkle the
cospargere il
path of our
sentiero della
lives
nostra vita
with
con molti
various
segni di
signs of
bonus.
auspiciousness.
Cioè, Shindele,
Chashidele.
buona giornata a
Have
tutti.
a very good day,